Today I am remembering my brother. A year ago today, my youngest brother passed. He passed away from COPD, and I'm taking a day to just remember him and to be grateful for the time that I had with him. I'm also going to be talking in this video about just the last 12 months, how crazy it has been. Just being transparent. My brother passed a year ago, and my mother, which I've never had a great relationship with at all, even to this date, I'm not talking to her because she's toxic. She's toxic. But my mother calls me. She calls me 4 days after he passed, saying, "Hey, your brother passed, and I've been trying to get a hold of you." Immediately when she said that, I did a side eye, like, "You've been trying to get a hold of me, but this is the same number I've had for 7 years." Okay. I didn't even say that, but that was what I was thinking, I'll be honest. So she goes on to say that he passed, and I asked what was the cause, and she said that he had COPD. All right. So I looked that up, and I understood what it meant, and I had asked, a couple of other follow-up questions, and, wondering if he had been, going to a doctor regularly, if he had been taking his medications and things like that. And no, my brother, he was stubborn. I love him dearly. I do. But he was stubborn. I think he got it honest. But as she's telling me this, and I just felt so much anxiety and so much grief come over me, because this was my youngest brother. This was my baby brother. This was, this little person. I remember coming into this world, and even at a very young age, before my mother gave me to someone else for them to raise me, not as adoption or anything like that, but that's a topic for another day. But I just remember changing his diapers, and I remember looking after him while we were in daycare, and making his bottles and pushing his stroller when my mother would come and pick us up. And, this was this little being who I felt was my baby. So much grief came over me that I didn't even know what to do with it. And I remember just screaming, and my fiance's looking at me like, "What is wrong with you? I've never seen you like this, ever." And as I'm trying to tell him, what has taken place, and I'm overcome with so much emotion that I didn't even know how to say it. And I remember just crying. I had no appetite for days. I just cried. So I spoke to my mother the next day. Still, so much sorrow had filled my heart. I had sorrow for not just for myself, but I had sorrow for my mother. Even though I never had a great relationship with her, I had sorrow for her. I felt sorrow in my heart for her. I felt sadness for her because she lost a son. It was bigger than the grief that I felt. So I call her the next day, and I'm talking to her, and, just trying to process everything. And in the midst of me, trying to process everything, and I'm asking her, I'm like, "Hey, do you need help with the funeral? What do you need?" I don't mind helping out. I don't have much, but I'm definitely going to help out in whichever way I can. I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul. But the conversation took a turn. Because it went from me being in a grieving stage for my brother, to me feeling like I had to defend myself from my mother. It was weird, but that's the story of my life. I've gotten used to it. And when I say I got chapters to tell you, I got chapters to tell you. Stay tuned. That'll be in a different video. So my mother, she goes on to say, I know that you slept with my ex-husband. And I'm telling her, I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, I know you slept with my ex-husband, and I know he fathered several of your children. Now, let's pause there for a second. I have 5 kids, 5 daughters. All 5 of my daughters have DNA tests for all 5 of their dads. They know who their dads are. Moving on. So, when she's saying all of this, I'm like, Mom, I would never sleep with your husband, your ex-husband. Now, do me and her ex-husband have a talking relationship? Absolutely. That is the father of my brother. So absolutely, I might call and check up on him like once a year, and he does the same for me. And he's always been the only father figure that I've ever had, because I've never had a father figure in my life at all. My father is in prison. He's been in prison since I was 17. And I've just never had a father figure in my life at all. So, as I'm saying this to her, I'm telling her, I'm like, Mom, you didn't give me a father figure to rely on, and a daughter needs her father, and he's the only person that has stepped up and has even tried to remotely be some type of a father figure to me. Why would I look at him in that type of light? So then she goes on to say that, oh, well, he's told me that, he's going to do what he can to make sure that I don't have a relationship with any of y'all. And she's going on and on and on. And I'm like, Mom, I don't care whatever the conversation was. I'm telling you, the only relationship that matters to me today is the relationship that you and I have, that I'm trying and have been trying to establish with you for over 20 years. And for whatever reason, Mom, you just keep sabotaging it. You keep sabotaging it. So as I'm trying to, just kind of break down those barriers and nip things in the bud, it just literally just rolled out of control. It rolled out of control to the point where she's yelling at me, and she's just like, oh, I know you slept with him, and I saw pictures of you that you sent to him when you were 13. Let's pause there for a second. I'm like, 13? I couldn't send him any pictures when I was 13. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 16. The lady who raised me, that I call my grandma, she didn't believe in getting kids cell phones at all. And she didn't give me my first cell phone until my 16th birthday. My 16th birthday. So I'm telling my mom, I'm like, well, look, I know I didn't send him any pictures. I know I didn't send him any because I didn't have my first cell phone until I was 16. And if there is pictures of me, I didn't send them to him. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So I'm just listening to her go on and on and on and on and on. And in my mind, I'm just like, I need to grieve my brother. I need to grieve my brother. Why can't I grieve my brother? So she's just going on and on and on. And then she says, you know what? She was like, and I've already made up my mind. She says, you're not welcome to the funeral. You're not coming. Your other 2 brothers aren't coming. Your sister's not coming. None of you are coming. So I'm like, Mom, okay, hold on. You're going too far. That's not right. We all loved him. And she's like, nobody loved him more than me. He was the apple of my eye. He was the love of my life. And I tell her, I said, Mom, that sounds weird. That sounds weird. This is your son you're talking about. It's not like you have one child. You got 5 children total. That's weird. Like, what is going on right now? oh, well, I don't want to deal with any of y'all. As a matter of fact, I'm hanging up. So she hangs up. And when the conversation ended, I get a notification from Facebook of people who were posting on my brother's timeline on his Facebook. So I left my post there as well, saying, I can't believe you're gone, and I'm gonna miss you. Like I was really looking forward to him moving up here with me, and now he won't be able to, but even in the midst of all of that, I felt so angry. I felt angry because I felt like that was just another tactic of someone trying to rob me of the happiness or the time for sorrow or just anything. I just felt robbed, and I just felt mad. I felt mad. Have any of you ever felt mad? I felt mad. And so a couple days passed, and I had tried reaching out to my mom because I know that she had rescheduled the funeral, but I was just basically trying to rekindle things, like just squash things where they are. I don't need to have a working relationship with you at this point as my mom, because it's obvious you don't want to be in my life, and that's fine. It's obvious you don't want to meet my daughters, which that's a whole nother topic for a whole nother day, because I tried and that just went so sideways. But it's obvious you want nothing to do with me, and that's okay, because I know I've done nothing to you, and I know that all the animosity that you throw towards me is misplaced hurt that you felt as a young woman with your mother. And that's a whole nother video for a whole nother day. I'm sorry I said that several times already. I'm telling you, my life has different levels of wow. But so I reach out to her, and I'm just at this point pleading with her, like, Mom, I just want to say my goodbyes to my brother. No, nobody's coming, and as a matter of fact, stop calling me, and yada 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 yada. So at the same time I'm trying to just nip things in the bud with my mom, I get a call from my cousin, and my cousin's telling me some nonsense that my mom told her mother, and I'm telling my mom, I'm like, why would you say that? Why would you tell people that I slept with your ex-husband? And then I proceed to tell her, like, Mom, you have AIDS, Mom. You have AIDS. So I'm telling her, I'm like, Mom, you have AIDS. Why would I do that? And I wasn't even saying it to be malicious to her. I was telling her straight truth. Why would I sentence myself to a lifetime of having to deal with something like that for a moment of pleasure? I don't even look at him like that. He has always been a father figure to me. So then that just made her even more upset with me. She yells at me, and the things that she said, I have never looked at my brother's father like that. And after she got mad and she hung up, it was like my grief turned into anger. It reached a tipping point. It reached a boiling point, because I couldn't understand why this woman who has played a role in bringing me into this world, I couldn't understand why she was so adamant on having so much hatred towards me. I couldn't understand. Here you are my mother, and I can't even call you Mom. Here you are, the woman who gave me life, and yet you will do anything to sabotage my life. I could not understand. So in the next few days that followed, it wasn't even sorrow that I felt. It was anger. It was hatred. I hated this woman. I'll be honest. I love God. I do. But in that moment, I hated her. And I hated her for a long time after. A long time after. I hated her. I hated her not just because of this current situation that I was dealing with her. I hated her because of remembering the childhood trauma that I went through with her, remembering the emotional abuse that I faced with her, remembering the physical abuse that I dealt with from her, the mental abuse that I dealt with her. Just all those old memories and old feelings started filtering through, and before I knew it, I was so mad. I felt like going on a warpath. So I secluded myself in the house for over 2 weeks. Yeah, I didn't go to church. I didn't do anything. 2 whole weeks. I just stayed in the house because I didn't want my misplaced anger to be taken out on someone who didn't deserve it. So through those 2 weeks, I did cry a little, but I spent more time angry than I did anything else. And for the weeks to follow after that, I spent time just trying to be antisocial as ever. And I'm an introverted person. Silence and solitary is like my best friend. But those weeks that followed was the most antisocial I think I have ever been in my life. And when I say weeks, I mean the weeks started turning into months. I just didn't want to deal with people. I had started putting up this shield that if I shield myself from people, if I stop making relationships with people, nobody can hurt me, right? I told myself that I didn't want to form any more personal relationships, no more close connections, because I started feeling like every time I made a close connection with someone, it was that same person that always just came back with a different agenda. So some months passed, and I started feeling back to my old self. Still a little antisocial, but not to the degree I was initially. Not really interested in church functions, but still trying to give God my all. But as I sit here today, was it really my all? So my birthday come and go, and the holidays roll around, and at this point I feel like I'm just going through a regular schedule of my day-to-day work, Bible study, praise team rehearsal, Sunday service, after work, checking with the kids, spend time with my fiance. Literally, my life just became a cycle. It became a cycle. And literally up until recently, that's just that's the habit I fell into. I figured if I just didn't deal with the hurt that I felt from my mom, if I just didn't talk about it, I could just suppress it and it would go away. That's not the case. That's not the case at all. Um, so recently, I went to an event at my church called a harp and bow. Basically, where you do praise, you do worship, and you just spend time at the Father's feet. And while I was there, I didn't know what to expect at first, but God told me I needed to go. So I went. And I'm so thankful that I did. I'm so thankful that I did. When I went there and the service started, and I just closed my eyes and I'm just talking to God, and I was telling God, silence the noise in my mind, steady my heart, and prepare me to hear a word from you. And I must have said this for maybe a good 30 minutes. And after some time, then I started to hear God speak to me. And I know you're probably wondering, what does that have to do with you remembering your brother today? I'm going to tell you. So God started talking to me, and I could just hear him clear as day, telling me, how can I take you where I want you to go when you haven't turned over that one thing to me? And I'm listening to God, and he was letting me know, he knew me. He knew me. He knew the different trials and tribulations that I went through. But he also knew of the hatred that I had for my mother. The hatred for my mother that I didn't talk about. The hatred of my mother that was so strong, I couldn't even be honest about it. I couldn't even verbalize it because the hatred ran deep. It ran deep. So here's God telling me, how can I take you where I want to take you, and you haven't turned over that hatred of your mother? How can you say that you love me, but you hate your mother? And I hear God telling me, it's one thing to be angry. It's one thing to be upset. It's one thing to be disappointed and mad and frustrated. But hate is a sin. So how can I call myself a daughter of God, a woman of God, but I hate my mother? And this wasn't no ordinary hate. I hated this woman with passion. The more I thought about her name, the more hatred started to build in my heart for her. I didn't wish bad things for her, but man, if she stood in front of my face on any one of those days up until that moment, I most likely would have punched her in her face. And I'm gonna be honest because the hatred ran deep. But here's God telling me, I need you to turn it over to me. You repressing it isn't helping you. You have got to let that thing go because it's keeping you in a crushed place. It's keeping you there. It's rooting you there. God tells me, he says, you've gotten better with turning other things to me over. Some of it may have been a delayed response, but nonetheless, I've seen the effort that you've done. But even that effort doesn't outweigh the current thing that you're holding on to, that seed of hatred that you're holding on to. I felt crushed. I felt crushed because I'm like, God, well, how do I do that? Now I'm getting frustrated. I'm like, well, how do I do that? You can't pick your mothers, you can't pick your fathers, but how do I do that, Lord? How do I let go of that hatred that ran bone deep? God says, he says to me, You have to trust me. You have to trust me. And you have to trust me in a way that you have never trusted me before. You have to be willing to walk blindly with me, trusting that I have every step of the way planned. Now, I wrestled with that for a moment. Don't ask me why. I did. I wrestled with that for a moment. And at some point during this service, I just said, okay, Lord. Okay. I give it to you, Lord. I give you every ounce of hatred that I feel in my body, Lord. From the crown of my head to the sole of my feet, Lord, I give you all of my hatred. All of it. All of it. Understanding, yes, Lord, I may never forget the turmoil and the anguish and the resentment and the abuse that I dealt with from my mother. I may never forget those things, but I know, Lord, that with you all things are possible. Sorry, a lawnmower just went by. I know, Lord, that with you all things are possible. And I know that fear is not my story.